think we're going to throw a size up scenario at you guys. So, Nick, if you want to share that. All right. So,
Lord Jesus, it's fire.
Lord Jesus. So we
What
put
is
this
that?
on we put this on our Facebook page and our Instagram page. So if you haven't gone there and you're listening to this and you're not watching it and you want to see what we're looking at here, feel free to do so. Barry, you want to describe what we're looking at?
Yeah. So looks like potentially 2-story, but I'd probably say that's a single-story wood frame structure. Depending on that, looks like there probably is a walkout in the back. I would bet there's like a basement walkout potentially. You have a heavy bulk of the fire, obviously confined to the garage. Looks like maybe a single-car garage with a side space. Immaculate grass. I just want to bring that up.
Yeah, it's a real tragedy.
Yeah,
Is that
being a homeowner,
some ladder is going to beach that lawn.
Yeah, being a homeowner, my first and foremost priority is to preserve property conservation, as Matt said earlier. Preserve that grass because that's phenomenal. Yeah, so it looks like 1.5 story wood frame structure. Obviously heavy fire isolated to the garage, potentially tenable space to the left hand side. So do you want to dive into like what everyone's initial call off is, or how do you want to dice this up?
Yeah, so for me, I'd say that's probably like a 1.5 story.
Yeah.
Obviously you got fire bulk in the garage. It's probably getting up in the eaves. You're gonna definitely risk having it on that top floor. I just see that window above what's probably like a living room or something there. To me, like no standing on the windows, no smoke pushing. May or may not have made it into the actual house at this point. Hard to tell.
Yeah.
Definitely an exposure issue.
Yeah.
So for me, so coming off, I would call that in as obviously I'd say a 1.5 story wood frame building, heavy fire in the garage. Definitely call it a working fire. And then I think my just given like a initial priority would probably be getting a 2.5 off the truck and getting the bulk of that fire in the garage and then wetting down that exposure. You can see it's burning between there.
Yeah.
And I think a 2.5 on this one, just the bulk of fire obviously is a lot. It's going to be it's a lot of fire. And then we don't know if there's a car in there or something that might be burning metal where we need to really have a high volume. And then obviously hitting that exposure. And then I think after that, the next line needs to go into the habitable space and make sure that door is closed. And if it's not, start putting out the fire and then probably be concerned about that top floor for sure, getting up in there.
So you want to do like a round table of like, your priorities as a squad, my priorities as an engine company, Cambridge, and then we can
why don't you go ahead and I got a couple
around.
people that actually responded to this on. So I don't mean to be on my phone, but I'm pulling it up. So from different departments that kind of gave their take on it too. So we can do that as well. So if you want to start, I'm actually going to step away and get this.
So, obviously we have the luxury, I'm on an engine company, so I'll approach it from the engine company perspective. But we have the luxury, we're going to have multiple engine companies coming to this call in relatively quick succession. Obviously you have heavy fire emanating from the garage. So depending on whether you get reports of occupants trapped, the priorities will differentiate. But you have bulk of the fire isolated to the garage, and you also have an exposure in pretty close proximity. So I would say, I had someone that I trust and admire very much say for most residential interior structure fires, 1 3/4 is going to be your bread and butter because it's so maneuverable. You can get around, right? So I'd say, obviously we have the luxury. I'd say 2.5 on the garage. You can knock down to the bulk of the fire, and obviously you're going to have 1 3/4 through that front door. Through the front door, especially if you have a report to occupants trapped. You want to put a hand line between potential occupants and the progression of the fire. Obviously, ladder companies are going to be doing their thing. Squad's probably going to be showing up doing search, right? But realistically, and if we have the opportunity to do so, I'd like to have multiple lines being stretched at the same time. So we have 1 3/4 through the front door, looking for extension, potentially putting that hand line between the progression of the fire and potential trapped occupants, as well as that 2.5 knocking down the bulk of the fire in the garage. And that'll probably happen pretty quickly. But that's my primary concern. Obviously, ladder companies will be working on ventilation in coordination with the engine companies. If the rescue's showing up, they're going to be doing search. They're also probably going to be helping with ventilation, securing utilities, the works. But and obviously, as I said, my priority is that grass, because knowing how much work has gone into that grass, whether there's an irrigation system on site that it can turn on, or whether you need to get an additional hand line on a fog pattern.
That guy's out there with
the house at this point is a loss. The grass is not a loss. And I know how much work has gone into that. Matt, you talked about earlier, like let's keep those couplings off the grass. I don't want any divots.
Yep.
Do what we can.
The house is a loss, but that
Yeah.
lawn can be saved.
That lawn can be. I don't want, I don't know what month this is, but like it's not scorched, right? So we have an opportunity to save that lawn for the rest of the season. Like, let's help that man preserve his dignity. He's lost his house. He has not lost his grass.
Mm-hmm. He can still mow that lawn even when the house is completely
Damn
right
it.
to the
You
ground.
can still care for it.
Yeah. The American flag's still standing.
Yep,
God damn it.
Yep, save that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Matt, you want to take it?
Yeah, so obviously I'm gonna pull off in my ambulance. I'm gonna look at this, and my first thing I'm looking at is we have a small staircase here, so I'm gonna grab my stair chair. Can't bring the stretcher into this one, and pretty much see, hey, what's going on today? What brings us here? So no, obviously, we had a couple of these exact scenarios play out recently. Actually, it was just funny how they, we had like 3 of them kind of back to back. And I will say, not being on any of them myself, but just kind of learning from the guys that did show up and some of their strategies. Like you were saying, the first due company pulling off a big line.
Yeah.
One of the guys I work with always, can't stress enough, big fire, big water. And so they had great success on this exact type of setup. More it was a split, split level house with a garage on the first floor.
Yeah.
Underneath like your typical, like a living room setup or something.
Yeah.
But and they were able to stop it to the garage space. And so I think it's just making that decision right away to kind of attack. And obviously but is there a car there? If there is, obviously someone must be home, right? Or so. Right. Priority do a search, right? Get in there and see if there's anybody.
Yeah.
But
I was trying to tell, and it looks like the bottom of that garage door is kind of burned away, but
it's tough. It's kind of tough to tell if that's a garage door. It's kind of hard.
I can't tell if there's a pillar there, and there's almost like a small subsection on the corner.
Yeah, it looks like it looks like not quite a 2-car garage, but it also could be deception just at the angle.
Yeah,
but it definitely looks like
at least they took their trash out, So.
Right.
Yeah, I mean maybe that's what started it.
Yeah,
or they just didn't bring it in after like a week.
Yeah,
and it's just sitting there.
He didn't bring it in, so she's like, "Fuck
you know what,
you,"
though,
and she lit the place
with a lawn like that.
Yeah,
he probably brought his trash.
Yeah. So Matt,
it's the
one of your
association
captains saying like, "Don't be a bitch, grab the 2.5."
Yeah. So I was at a similar, it wasn't a garage, but it was a split level home, and they had a living room set up, in there, and a couple sofas, and they had one of those what the fuck are those you ride on them, the 2-wheeled things, the hoverboards.
The
hoverboards.
Yeah.
And it caught fire.
Lithium ion.
Yeah,
We'll talk
the
about
batteries,
it.
those lithium ion
Absolutely,
batteries.
gotta be a subject
And
at some
so the family wasn't home, and caught fire, and the first due company pulled off a 2.5. Did a little transitional attack from the outside, the ground level windows, and got pretty much all of it out. And then, from there, I pulled up a second on scene. I was on the ambulance, and basically, hey, make force entry. Let's go in, and we'll hit it from the rest. So I was able, fortunate enough to get some forcible entry work in, and then gearing up and everything. The guys knew because I was 6 days out of the academy, so I was fortunate enough at the time. The guys,
actually, I remember. I think Barry texted me and was like, "This motherfucker got a job and he just got out of the fucking."
I was fortunate enough with the guys I work with are great, and they knew that, and they were trying to let me get some work in. And but anyways, so at the doorway, somebody made the suggestion, "Hey, let's grab an 1 3/4. We'll bring it in." And the captain, a very old school guy, was like, "You have a 2.5 right here. Fucking bring that in right now." And somebody's like, he's like, we'll grab an 1 3/4. We'll just pull it in there. He goes, get that fucking 2.5 in there right now. He goes, there's like 5 of you sitting here. He goes, what the fuck are we talking about? Right. And basically, all right. And that's exactly what we did.
So
and
Matt picked the whole thing up himself and just trudged in there with it.
He was like, all right, sweet. I don't have to go to the gym today.
Yeah, right. So, so it was just kind of funny, varying opinions and whatever.
And that's the thing. It's like, there are things that are definites and there are things that are opinions. Like I heard you say about taking an 1 3/4.
Yeah.
And like to my point with the 2.5, if depending on the scenario and how it was rolling up, like the ultimate goal is to obviously get this fire out and then get anybody and protect inside. So if my role was going to be hit that fire and then advance into the house, I would pull probably 1 3/4 inches. But if you had the personnel there, I would just put a 2.5 because not the odds are, but I say that there's at least a reasonable scenario, reasonable likelihood that door is closed and it held it. And if you can wash down those eaves and like before it gets up into there and get that fire out in the garage, then you might not have a problem. That
I was gonna say that looking at that house, and I know people who own similar homes, whether they're like the prefab homes or whatever they are. There's a doorway and then an entry, like a closet,
like a mud room,
and then
kind of
another
thing, right?
door. So you actually have, like, in a situation like this, I think you get there and you knock the bulk of that fire down and you're done. I don't think there's going to be a lot of now the problem is if it's just a regular house that got built on site and wasn't modular, right? That's great. Now you get these prefab homes where some of them are designed to go a second story if you want to add on later, things like that. Now you have that. You have that space.
Yeah, that modular.
Yeah, you have that space in between the floors, and now you might have to account for that. And you might have to pull some ceilings and do some things like that.
I definitely think that no matter what, you're taking a line into the occupied space.
No
matter what, whether or not you think
no question, but you're definitely going through the front door.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah, I would probably be going through a front door and taking a turn towards that garage, or going right up the stairs. I think the most likely spread of this fire is going to be into the attic. And looking at this house, you're probably going to be dealing with like potentially knee walls and shit in there too. So like it could definitely become like a pretty significant fire if it got into those eaves, into that cockloft and attic space, and behind knee walls. Yeah, which I mean, it looks like it's definitely cooked a good amount of the front of that house, so it's definitely a possibility.
So I think there's a few factors, and one of the points that I brought up was, a mutual mentor. I think a mentor to almost everyone at this table had said it's always a compromise between speed and maneuverability and GPM.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think anytime, and I think this kind of speaks to that generational change. This looks like relatively midday. Right. So I think 20 years ago, most people would say, hey, midday, there's probably a fair chance that probably no one's home, maybe. But now, like the COVID environment, like a lot of people work remote. So there's a high chance, the time of day doesn't really matter anymore. So you have to almost operate on the assumption that it is an occupied structure until proven otherwise. But at a minimum, a 2.5 for exterior operations and 1 3/4 inches through that front door.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would think too. And if you if you're in a smaller place, or that you're also going to be making that entry, then maybe you do pull just the 1 3/4 inches and hit as much of that as you can, and then try and come from the other side and push it. But I'm also that person I've had conversations with as well, and I'm a big 1 3/4 inches inside residential structures.
You're gonna fight room to room.
So much
how
easier.
Are you gonna fight that fire room to room?
Yeah, big open spaces is another thing, but residential structures.
I don't think you're gonna find much argument there.
Yeah. I mean that. There are people that are they are 2.5 because the thing with the houses now is everything's plastic, so it gets real hot, it gets real smoky real fast, and people like that GPM. But and even in our job, like at least you have the manpower to move it. And some jobs like you really don't. Yeah,
So
not that you can't get it done, but
I think that's a good caveat.
You want me to read?
Yeah, because I think that represents the choice. Like we're all lucky that for the most part, we all have greater than 10-man minimum career fire departments. You don't really have to make the choice. I mean, you're going to make the choice on scene. Am I pulling 1 3/4 inches or 2.5? But one way or the other, if you make the decision to pull the 1 3/4 inches, someone else is coming behind you to pull that 2.5. Right. But
or vice versa.
Or vice versa. But you look at these smaller jobs, like where they have enough staffing to essentially supply that initial engine company, and then the next engine company coming in is mutual aid. They got to make a choice. Like, am I pulling that 2.5 and 1 3/4? And that has significant implications of how this fire is going to go. Yeah. So I think that's a good caveat.
So I'll read a couple of these comments off our Facebook page.
Yeah.
So this first one is a guy named Brian, and he is actually the chief of his department, a pretty small department. Barry, you're more familiar. I don't want to
alma mater, dude.
Yeah, I don't want to give like department names and stuff like that. Yeah. But do you know the daily staffing there?
I think they were going for like a 3-man minimum, right? Is that right?
They're only 2 right now, though, right?
So I can't really speak super intelligently to it, but I think during the day they have the ambulance is staffed plus the chief plus one additional guy on days Monday through Friday. So essentially you're looking at 4 guys.
Okay.
Max. And actually, now I'm reading that, that's pretty clear. So he says car 1's responding with 1 engine that has 2, maybe 3 personnel. So that kind of leads to that, depending on the day and whatever. For any reported fire, they dispatch a first alarm, bringing any available personnel in and an aerial from a mutual aid department. So I'm guessing if somebody calls and says, "Hey, there's fucking flame shooting on my house,"
so that's automatic mutual aid.
He said in this case, car 1's on scene, single story, type 5, approximately 50 by 40 with an exposure. Said he'd bang a second alarm automatically. Engine 2, if in the hydrant district, so this is a town that also doesn't have hydrants. So, again, like kind of representing that world that I'm not even. I mean, I've drafted a brush truck, but
so I have had the opportunity to draft, and that's where I credit that call experience. But we all work in Metro Boston, so say something like drafting, like, dude, the fucking world's ending if we're drafting.
Yeah. We actually have a small end of our town that is not in the hydrant district.
Yeah.
So, but we also have a call going to a tanker if we have a call at that. I mean, a fire down that end of town.
So he says if they're in the hydrant district, they're going to lay in, start knocking down with a 2.5. Next arriving apparatus is 5 to 15 minutes out from the first apparatus. That is a long time for a fire. That's a long time to be running with 2 guys. Leaves a person to make the hydrant. So these guys are so he's not only potentially not having a hydrant. If he has when he's laying the line in, but he doesn't have the personnel to actually make it. So you're 5 minutes before you're even getting water.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you're looking
which
at
means you have to like be smart too, right? You can't just crack a 2.5 on tank water and leave it running for 2 minutes. You're gonna be out of water.
Yeah.
No.
You have to make the decision if you're running 2 guys on an engine company, plus you have a car responding. You have to make the decision: are we going to run on tank water and try and knock down the bulk of the fire, or are we going to have one of those guys get off the engine, make the hydrant, while this guy essentially gets the lines ready, and then once they're, like you're making really tough choices.
You're making tough choices, and neither one is wrong, and both are hard decisions.
Or are you putting life safety right up front?
Yeah.
And are you getting there, not worrying about the hydrant in a sense, or if the chief's out in front of you, or somehow, I don't know, are you getting there and are you making sure you're doing a quick primary?
Yeah.
With all hands on deck, and then extinguishing what you can, because if no one's gonna die, and it turns into a surround and drown, in my opinion,
the exposure is the important thing in that scenario.
If
everybody's out of the house and whatever, then you put out as much as you can. You protect the exposure so it doesn't get any worse, basically. But
it's just whatever the best practice is, really, is how it shakes out.
So he says, make entry, attack, fire search. He said it'd probably go to a 3rd alarm, which would bring a total of 5 towns and 30 to 40 firefighters arriving at different times over 30 to 45 minutes. He's a big proponent. Call him early and often. You can always turn him back. If out of the hydrant district, water supply is a whole other challenge. Activate the 4th alarm tankers only, depending on how far away the supply is.
You're talking tanker shuttles.
Yeah, I
mean that's the thing. Like I don't think people think about, especially in Metro Boston. Like you need to get that tanker shuttle early and often. And like I know that obviously, it's one of my closest friends, highly intelligent, great fire officer, and like he's one of his big things was like call him early. You can always cancel him if you don't need him.
Yeah,
especially
in
15-20 minutes.
He just said. So the last part of this is we have areas consisting of over a 5-mile loop to fill and dump a tanker.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long fucking way to haul water.
Yeah.
That's, and I don't even think people that live there sometimes realize like, oh, they're just like, yeah, we have a fire department. And be like, yeah, listen, your fire department's gonna be a little bit more challenged than one that has a hydrant every 500 feet. You know what I mean? Not that they're not gonna get it done. And I think that back to your point that like people take these small town jobs for granted, and sometimes these are really, really knowledgeable people.
Not only bringing the pump, you got to bring your own goddamn water.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
Hey guys, if you like that clip, check out the full episode of Job Talks on our channel. Make sure you're subscribed to watch a new episode there every Saturday at noon.
Nailed it.
Can I use that one? Because it's
Nailed it.
No, that's the one.